I am Estelle Amann. I come from the Department of Culture. Many of you know me already or have had contact. Today, we're talking about the working stipend for non-German language 2025. This presentation is divided into two parts. First of all, we will talk about the general information for the stipend. You can also find all of these bits of information in the info page, which is on our website. At the second point, we will go through the actual online application and the attachments which you need to upload. This funding program is aimed at professionally working writers, authors who do not work in German and who live with their primary residence in Berlin. Funding is available for fiction, for children's and youth literature and poetry. However, no drama, no theater, no translations. There is a separate column for this, a separate department funding theater and translations. If at the time of the application, of the time of applying, and of the scholarship, you will be in a literature training program, for example, those available in Leipzig, Hildesheim, Biel, Vienna. If you are matriculated in creative writing or literature programs in those schools, you may not apply. If you are active as a professor in one of these training programs at a university, you may not apply. Employees of the Senate Department for Culture in Berlin and their relatives may not apply, and members of the jury and their relatives also not eligible to apply. It's only possible to turn in one application per applicant. Of course, if you upload two applications, I will notice that, and your application will not be eligible. If at the time of this stipend, in 2025, you also are receiving a scholarship from the Deutsche Literaturfonds, it is not possible to combine both sources of funding at the same time. If you have already applied for or already received stipends for the year 2025, you must note this in your application form so that we know how much you are receiving from other sources. If you are potentially receiving or could be receiving further stipends from public funding of the state of Berlin or from the German Literature Fund, you must give this information in your application. All of the various stipends of the state of Berlin, working scholarships, research scholarships, and cultural exchange scholarships may be combined for an overall sum of 24,000 euro per year. So it would be possible, for example, to receive 8,000 from one source, 16 from another source, for example. However, the maximum sum permitted from all of these public funding sources from the state of Berlin is 24,000. As you see already in the presentation, there is various amounts of funding available. The working stipend can be applied for the sum of 24,000 for 12 months, 16,000 for 8 months, or 8,000 for 4 months. You will have to note these amounts in your application and the time periods. Now we will cover the checklist.
I will speak now about the application uploads. It's like a checklist now. You need to include a short description of your project in German. It is important that this short description is handed in German. If it is not in German, you will be excluded from the application process. So beware that you write that in German. Here we also ask you to state the language of the text sample that you're handing in. That's a great help for me because I don't have to research the language of your text sample. Regarding the uploads, I highly recommend that you please prepare them beforehand so that you have them at hand when applying. You need to upload a CV in which you include a list of your publications from the last 3 years. including the title, the place of publication, etc. The project description expose may be handed in German or English, please no other languages. The expose refers to the submitted text sample and describes project. Here we also ask you to state the language of the text sample. It is very important that this expose should not exceed 2 pages. If you add further pages, even if the third page has only 1 word, we have to exclude you from the application process. So please beware, only hand in 2 pages. It can always be less, but please do not hand in more, otherwise you will be excluded from the process. It's a formal requirement. Then we asked you for a text sample of an unfinished literary project in the original language, in your language that you're writing in. The text sample should not exceed 20 pages, not more. The 21st page excludes you from the process. You will be formally excluded if you hand in more pages, even if there's nothing on it. Please make sure to avoid that situation. I also don't like that. Funny for me to exclude you for something like that, but it's important. Optionally, you don't have to, but you may hand in up to 2 further text samples and or German translations of parts of the submitted text sample. Again, these further text samples should not exceed 20 pages. Keep it there. You may also optionally upload documentation and information material about the previous artistic work, newspaper articles or documentations of whatever this belongs. So now I'll speak about the proof of residence in Berlin and residence permits. For applicants with German citizenship, you upload a copy of your identity card, Personalausweis, front and back. The back is important because it includes your registration address. Or you upload a copy of the registration confirmation issued by the Berlin's residence registration office. For applicants from European Union countries, you upload a copy of your identity card, front and back, and a copy of the registration confirmation. We need proof of your residence confirmation in Berlin. If you come from a non-European Union country, we need again the copy of your identity card or passport, front and back, and a copy of the registration confirmation, Meldebestätigung, and a copy of your residence permit or certificate of the right of residence, front and back. This is important that we receive all of this. Some important notes here. Only complete, formally valid, and timely applications will be considered for evaluation and handed over to the jury process. Missing documents will not be requested. If you forget something, we don't ask for it. It's your responsibility. Subsequent submissions are no longer possible after the application has been sent. If you realize that you made a mistake, you wish to make changes to your application, within the application deadline, you must submit a new application and let me know that you want to withdraw your old application. For this, I need the form ID, the check number that you find on your application. So if you made a mistake, you can hand in a new application and withdraw the old one. The deadline for the application is on May 16, 24 noon. Now I'll speak about the online application form. Many of you have seen it already or have handed in an application in the past, but some of you might do it for the first time. So I will guide you through the form. The link for this application form you find on the website of the funding program. It reads Zugang zum Online-Antragsverfahren at the bottom of the page. When you click there, you get to the starting page of the application center. First, you have to choose the funding program. You have to select the scheme of funding literature, and then please select the funding program Arbeitsstipendien 2025 für nicht deutschsprachige Literatur. Beware that you do not apply for the German language program, but you select the non-German, nicht deutschsprachige program. And then you need to confirm that you have read the info sheet. I do ask you to read that info sheet all guidelines and all conditions stated there. On the second page, you're asked to give us your personal information about the applicant, name, address, etc., your email address. This is very important that there is no typo in that, and that it is your current email address that you're using and receiving, and that your account is not overloaded, and that you can receive our email because it's our main communication channel. That's how we reach you, and you need to be able to receive that. On the third page, we ask you to describe your project, the short description I talked about. It needs to be written in German, and it is limited to a maximum of 1,900 characters, including spaces and paragraphs. Please indicate the language of the text sample here. Below, you need to choose the type of literature. It's a drop-down menu, so you can select from that. On the next page, you select the amount you're applying for, the 24,000, 16,000, or 8,000. There is time spans. On the next page, we speak about the Parallelförderung if you receive other funding, and you need to click on the symbols plus or the pencil to enter further funding that you have applied for or that you received. On the next page, it's about funding that you have received in the previous 3 years. So you need to click the yes again. First, you need to click the yes to then fill in. Please let us know from whom and what sum you have received. On the next page, you can upload the CV and the text sample, etc. It's stated where you have to upload what. Please make sure that you do not exceed the maximum file. There will be an error signal if you exceed the maximum weight of the file, but if you have too many pages, it won't. So please make sure you don't exceed the page number. This is what it looks like. The copies of the identification, everything is uploaded where you need it. And then on the same page, you have the option to enter further links, or if a part of your sample is a video or images, you can fill in the links. On the next page, you can review your information and attachments before handing them in. Please make sure there are no typos. And on the last page, einsenden, you need to confirm some statements that you have fully understood and given us the correct information. Please read it and check. And at the end, you can click on Antrag einreichen, hand in the application, and then you will receive an automatic confirmation email that can take up to 24 hours. So please don't panic if there is no confirmation in 5 minutes, but usually it's quick, but it can take up to 24 hours. If you realize that you made small mistakes, typos before you hand in, you can jump between the pages by using the navigation or the button Zurück at the bottom of the page. You also have the possibility to save your data in between. You cannot save your attachments in between your filling out the form. I recommend not to use it. It's not impossible, but it's quite complicated actually. So I'd rather recommend take your time, 15, 20 minutes to enter the application in one go without saving in between. It's just a personal recommendation. Prepare your text and your upload files carefully, and then go through the application form and hand in. You also find FAQs in the application tool, but it's not about the funding program, it's just about the application tool. What happens after submitting the application? You receive an automatic confirmation email. I also receive it. I will check your application for completeness and eligibility to apply. If this is the case, the documents are forwarded to the jury. This jury then takes some time to review the document and selects the stipend recipients in a final jury meeting. Afterwards, all applicants receive information by email if they receive a stipend or if they do not receive a stipend. You definitely receive an email from me to that email address that you gave us in the application form. That's why it's important that it's your current email address. If you receive a stipend, you also get notification by post. Therefore, it is important that we always have your current postal address. Then we also ask you to return a declaration of consent with your bank account details to us so that you can receive the money. On the website of the Senate Department and the funding program, you find the information sheet. Please read it. And FAQs regarding the funding program, they are only available in German at the moment, but there are also great translation tools online where you can translate. You also find my contact information on the website by telephone or email. I prefer to be contacted by email. If you can manage to do that instead of calling me, I'm glad, but I'm also available via telephone. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Estelle Amann, who took us through this stipend application process. There are very many questions already in the chat, so let's get started with asking the first of those. The first question: if I had applied and not received a stipend last year, and I'm still working on the same project, would you recommend that I apply with the same project, or does it not have any chance if it's not a new project this time? Formally, I can say that you are allowed to apply with the same project. It's not excluded. I cannot say how high your chances are by applying with a project that was not successful last year, how the jury would see that. I can say that there is a new jury this time. A new jury, better chances, I don't know. It really depends on whether they find your writing sample convincing, whether or not you receive a stipend. Thank you. I'll take the second question. Is the list of publications limited to the last 3 years? Or can I mention older publications I might have written? The answer is yes, you can list older publications from yourself. Should you have published something within the last 3 years? Is it a must in order to be considered? I could say there's no formal criteria for this. If your publications are older than 3 years old, I cannot really say how it affects your chances. I'm not the jury. In the end, what counts is the quality of your writing sample. So if the jury finds your writing sample good, convincing, even though you haven't published within the last 3 years, it could be possible still to get a stipend. Is it required to prove where you have published? Do I have to submit a book? If so, how? If I have self-published something, do I have to... Please don't send in any books. No, that would be a bit much. Don't have to prove where you have published, of course. Where the book has appeared, the publisher should be, and the year of the publication should be listed. About self-publishing, it will count. That is valid. It's not a requirement that you have published in order to have a valid application. So self-publishing is certainly also valid. And to supplement that comment from Lilian, why do we have to list publication? For the jury, it's important to notice your competence in writing, your literary competence. It could be recognized through the writing sample that you submit or within the project that you're working on, but it could also receive a higher value, a different value through publications that have appeared. That really depends on the kind of publication. If you are a poet, perhaps you publish in journals or on the internet. Perhaps you have published a book, and that might have more weight, carry more weight than different forms of publication. But as said, all of these various forms of having published are eligible to be considered. One more thing on this issue. Some questions in the chat are about, if I have not published anything yet, is it okay if I apply? Yes, there is no requirement that you have published in order to apply. And now various questions about the short description and the exposé. Questions on this. Are there examples of short descriptions of applications that I could look at? There are no visible examples of applications that have succeeded. This has to do with data protection, privacy. But what I can say is that the short description, which must be in German within the application, it is limited to this 1,900 characters. I'm going to abstract that out of your application. This all gets entered into an Excel table, an Excel sheet. The jury receives this sheet with these lists of short descriptions. As I have said in other info sessions, it's like a teaser. Your short description is a bit of a teaser. The number of characters is limited, the text is very concentrated, but think of it as an advertising blurb, a very snappy short text about the exposé as a required attachment. It could be in German or in English. It is limited to 2 pages. That means also there you have to be precise and concentrated in your formulation, but you do have a bit more space there in order to say more about your project. You have to imagine that the jury probably have no idea who you are. They don't know you as a writer, your author. They don't know your works. And so in the exposé, you simply have to write, what is your work about? What will your work be about? Everything that doesn't appear in your CV, you have the chance in the exposé to describe your work. Perhaps it also helps to know how these short descriptions and exposé are used in the application process. In these short texts, the short description, the 1,900 characters are used to remind the jury they have up to 300 applicants per year and in various languages. Within the jury session, the short text should help the jury to remember which name was related to which work, to remind them who you are. And within these sessions, some of the jury members may not look very long at the short descriptions, but jump right to the exposé. So that's how important the exposé is, that it may be the only thing the jury members really deeply look at. The short text is simply to remind them of who you are. The jury will sit in session for 2 years, and they really need a helpful reminder. I would also add the tip, it could help then within the short description, the 1,900 character text, remind us how you intend to carry out the work. If you need to travel, make a short trip, perhaps. Don't make the jury have to comb through your exposé to be reminded of how you intend to carry out this project. Put it in your short description already. What is your exact plan to finish your project? There are concrete questions about the short description. Does the sum also have to appear in the short description, the sum I'm applying for? No, you do not have to list a sum within the short description. That is also a part of the application. The jury does have the sum available, so you don't have to list it. Don't take time, take space with that sum in that short description. About applying, it's really good to know what is your goal, what is your intention in carrying out your project. Please write, what are your purposes? What is your intent? That would help us very much. About the intent of your application, how to answer that exactly. People are asking in the chat about the travel plans or the intention. It is not a must in order to apply that you have to travel for your purposes. It is helpful for us to know. It's of interest to the jury to know where do you plan to travel? How does it support your writing project? If you are trying to publish something, it's definitely very interesting to us to know, are you in contact with a publishing house? Please write these kinds of details into your project descriptions. one further question about the information page on the website. Referring to the information page, the expose says it can be in German or English, but within the application form, it says only German. So which one is which? As the name Muster or sample application suggests, it's only a sample. Not everything, not all of the details in there are exactly precise for this application. It should just give you an idea of how an application would look, but it may not be accurate exactly for your application. So what is on the app, the information page, the infoblatt is what is presented there is accurate and is also important. Those are the actual accurate details of how to apply. Is it possible in listing the publications to add a portfolio of various works? Instead of a publications list, can I put in a portfolio of writing samples? If your opinion is that this is relevant for the jury, then you may do that. We don't have an exact requirement list of what's in the CV. That is up to you how to design it. If, in your opinion, there's a different view to be gained through presenting your work in this way, you may enter it. However, it should not be a 50-page CV, please. Please limit yourself in the scope of your CV. I would also like to supplement. You also have the possibility to add up to 4 other samples of work or works that you are working on simultaneously. You can add documentation material, documenting your work. But in my experience out of the jury sessions, I would recommend please limit your attachments in order that we can really take a deep look at them. What would a jury member really gain from seeing further and further examples of your work? I have seen with over 300 applicants, up to 300, the jury has a very limited time in order to look through all of these documents. And they will be concentrating very closely on your written sample, your writing sample. Further uploads, further attachments and documents won't get as much attention. They may not even be looked at all. So my recommendation would be in the jury session, for the jury session, the members will be looking at the extra documents you have uploaded in case they have a CV that describes a very big spectrum of talents. And maybe I've done some poetry and now I'm writing prose, or I'm also a visual artist and now I'm also writing. My literary competence is also related to my work in the visual arts. In this case, of these kinds of applications, then your related materials that you upload might be interesting for us. Or perhaps you are active in the sciences or research, and you happen to also be writing a literary work. So it's important for us to see a connection of your other areas of expertise. But please, otherwise, check very carefully whether you want to make the effort to upload many different attachments, keeping in mind that the jury may be only looking at these documents very briefly. For the artistic CV, is there a special format that we have to follow? Should it have to be in German? Should it be in table form, chart form? Can it be in prose form? There is no special requirement. It's really up to you how you design your CV. It can be in German or it can be in English, the CV. About the CV, should it only be your artistic CV, or should it also cover your education, your training? I would like to supplement, keeping the background in mind. The application form and your writing should be in German because you're applying to a German institution and the application language is German, but all the other attachments that the jury will be viewing and the short description, including the short description, They are for the institution, the German state-funded institution. But the jury will be looking at the artistic materials. They can be in other languages. So the application form, everything what's including also the short description, those things should be in German. And it would be sad to reject your application if those things were not in German. For those who have already submitted an application and now realize that your short description is not in German, little tip, you do have to reapply, making a new application, and please write the short description this time in German. Then there's the question, whether the amount of the stipend will be taxed. I cannot answer that question. Moritz Malsch will add. Yes, I know a lot about this topic. It is not so simple in a chat. It really will depend on your on your revenue tax. It's very clear that no revenue tax will be taken. This is not considered a profit. This is not a paid service. It is funding, a grant, but it is income in that sense. And your individual finance officer in the tax office will decide whether this counts as income. And the criteria are very vague in the description. It appears that in general, in the rule, the stipend should be considered recognized as tax-free. However, it could be possible that you are charged taxes for this stipend. In any case, you do have to declare the stipend. There is a special section in the tax declaration for stipends, and then do seek a tax advisor to help you with this submission in your tax declaration. If you are unlucky, then the income will be counted as taxable income. You could have to pay income tax on it for your overall yearly income, and possibly also in following years you would have to pay tax because you have earned through the stipend so much in this year. So very basically, in regular work stipends, they are handled in this way, basically. So please do get a tax advisor's counsel on how to declare your stipend, and hopefully it won't be taxed. Will the further writing samples, the extra ones that are written, are they allowed to be in different languages? Do they have to be translated when we provide them? You may submit them in different languages. Of course, it's the question of whether the jury will even be able to read them. The jury, whether these languages are available on the jury. Is it possible to submit extra writing samples in various languages? Yes, as I said, it's possible, but of course it's a question of whether the jury has the competence to read these various languages. And the question of translation, it is possible to submit a translation of these writing samples, but it is not required. It's really optional. And just in order to read all of the writing samples that are required, the jury members have very little time. So I can say from my experience that it also happens that the jury will not even read the extra writing samples because they simply do not have the time. So please do not spend too much energy perfectly presenting the extra writing samples. Please concentrate on the acquired writing sample, the one that counts toward your application. That is the one that will count it the most. One more thing to add. For those of the languages that the jury may not have in their competencies, the jury will turn further writing samples in other languages over to competent translators who can judge the quality of those samples. So after the admissions have been submitted, applications have been submitted, we make the greatest effort to measure the quality of various languages, various writing samples in other languages. Related to the question, if you have applied with your exposé, there is an evaluation, and if several languages have appeared within your extra attachments, extra writing samples, we will not do any other evaluation of your extra writing samples. So it really isn't possible that your further attachments, your further writing samples will really be measured as to their quality. The most important one will be the exposé, which will be evaluated for its literary quality. For doctoral students or PhD candidates who are no longer matriculated as students, can they apply? Are they eligible? Students are not excluded from applying, but if they are in these literary writing programs, creative writing, literary writing in Leipzig and Hildesheim and the other listed cities, if you are not in a creative writing program or a literary writing program, if you are in a different program of study as a student, or as a doctoral student, or as a professor in another field in a university, professors are excluded regardless of their subject. Students may apply if they are not in creative writing or literary writing programs.
Now, there's several questions regarding the time span and the sum of the stipend, and how far do we have to prove how much time we need for our project. You do not need to prove that. You know best how long it takes for your project, and if you are in the final stages of your work, then a year stipend of 24,000 wouldn't make so much sense, and the jury wouldn't give you that. But if you're just starting your project, then it makes more sense to receive a year of the work stipend. Thus, the time span should be related to your actual need for your work. And in your expose, you have to clarify to us where you are in your process and how much time you will still take to finalize. And if you can actually do that within the time span of the stipend, the jury will then know how much you need and relate that to the sum that you selected, that you applied for. So if you apply for 24,000 euros, they may reduce that to the 16,000. And if you apply for 16,000, they may reduce that to 8,000. 8,000 may not be reduced. Maybe it helps to know how the decisions were made last year. Last year, we accepted 15 stipends where, no, I lost the numbers, I'm sorry. The jury discusses carefully and intensely if you give someone the highest rate, the highest sum, and there's an intense discussion if maybe the 16,000 are enough for the time that an applicant has to finalize. The chances are better if you apply for a sum of 8,000. No, it won't. A stipend is a singular funding for your literary artistic development, and that needs time. Why you use public money is because you need time to develop, and you decide which time you need for that and how much time I have, subtracting other things I need to do, caring for other people, doing wage work. And a jury will also look at that, not at what time you have left and what else you do in your life. The jury doesn't know that, but to understand where you're at with your project and how much time you will still need to invest into that project. And then they decide if the sum you selected and apply for is realistic. Looking at the funding that we have received beforehand, do we only have to state it in the application, or do we have to prove it? You only need to state it. We only need the information. We don't need proof. Now, there are several questions regarding the genre. If you can hand in non-fiction, creative non-fiction, is that eligible? Yeah. This question and this discussion always arises. A classic non-fiction book, Sachbuch in the German language field, is excluded. We're speaking about literature and not about academic writing or non-fiction books. In the English language context, the definitions are slightly different. non-fiction is not the same as Sachbuch. If there is creative literary writing within that non-fiction frame, I'm not the person who evaluates your application. I cannot exclude that. It might be included in the jury process, and then it is up to the jury to decide, well, is this actually a classical Sachbuch or is it rather literary? And it's a gray zone. Thank you. Now there are several questions regarding the format of the documents. Do these documents, the expose, the text sample, have a certain font size or font style? Do you need norm pages? Thank you for that question. The most important principle regarding the uploads documents, the expose and the text sample, is the readability. The jury has a lot to read, and if you upload a document a font size of 8 and you know what the jury will think after 3 applications like that. They can't read it anymore and they're frustrated. So the most important principle is to make your documents readable for the jury. I have recommendations there. There's use font without serifen, font size 12 and a line distance of 1.5. That's used in the academic context as well. You can read the documents well with that. If you prefer the layout of a norm page, that's fine too. Please take a step back, look at your documents. Is it readable? Not from your subjective perspective, but objectively, is it easy to read? Is it too tight? Is it too small? If you can say no to that and you're sure and you see possibilities to increase the readability, do it. We understand that you might want to squeeze in as much as possible in the limited pages, but please try to take the perspective of the jury, depending on how many texts are handed in, how many applicants. If you have to read 80 applications and they are all in a really small font size, your frustration is quickly rising. Does this stipend have any consequences regarding later publications? Will the projects be published with the press? From our side, we do not connect to publishers, or there's also no obligation to publish your work. The stipend does not have to end with a publication. The only thing I can say is that if you receive a stipend, there will be a presentation, a public presentation, together with all other stipend recipients, usually organized by LCB, Literary Colloquium Berlin, usually in August, September. That's up to the LCB. We do not connect you to publishers or presses, and we don't publish as the Senate department. And there is a question regarding the text sample. If you send a text sample to a press, you usually send the first 20 pages of the book. Shall the text sample for the stipend be the first 20 pages as well? Or can we choose other 20 pages? You can do that. You may take the first 20 pages, or you can take another part from the middle of the book. It would be kind to tell us in the expose what you're doing, why you're doing it. The jury doesn't know your text, and if you choose something, if you choose the middle part of the book, you might need to introduce that to the jury. What are the criteria of the jury for selecting the future stipend recipients? Are they also looking for new and young writers, or do only people receive stipends who already have published? Criterion is your literary quality. The jury evaluates this quality in their session. There are 5 to 6 people discussing that. We always tell the jury it is good to support young writers. That's not age, but the literary professional age. And to support writers who are new in the field. There's no reason to give a lot of federal money to people who are not dependent on this funding for further developing because they're already established. But the criteria are the same for everybody. May I hand in two different projects, one in German and one in my mother tongue? There is also a stipend program for the German language literature. If you're writing in German, please choose that funding program. And when you're writing in a foreign language, you apply for the German language program. Would you want to do that in the same application, or I don't get it? Usually you apply for the German in the German language program, and or is it a parallel work in two languages and it's part of the same project? Or
the question was about applying for the German language program, funding program, and also for the non-German language writing program. It is possible to apply for both in parallel, but you may not receive both of the stipends at the same time. One of them will be excluded. If you would like to increase your chances, you may apply in German for the German writing program and in your other language for the non-German literature program. But the jury will, if you receive both of those stipends, you will have to reduce your scholarships to one.
Is there a quota for languages? I imagine that there will be many English language texts. Is it then limited how many English language applicants are accepted and the rest is given to other languages explicitly? Or do I have a higher chance with everything beyond English? Indeed, there are many English language applications. That's the highest language quota there. But we do not have a funding quota regarding language. Also, the jury doesn't do that. We're only looking at the artistic quality of your text sample. That's the basic principle. And in the end, many English language applications receive the funding, but it's related to the percentage. The more applications in a certain language we receive, the higher the number of those are chosen. That's math. But it doesn't mean that 50% of the stipend applications must be in English. The main reason is the quality, independently of the language. So I don't know how to say that. No, all languages have the same chances. And I might add here, people are asking about Palestinian authors. I'll read it. Will Palestinian authors be accepted? Do they have an actual chance, or are they censored regarding the state attitudes of the German government? There's the urgent need, and the question is if they actually have a chance. An administrative department, the funding independently of the government. It's not politics handing out these funding, but the administration. So we are in distance of the state, of the government. So we are funding people who, regarding their literary quality, and that's the decisive criterion. Thus, of course, Palestinian writers will be read and evaluated and have the same conditions as everybody else regarding the literary quality. Anyways, we probably need to say that there is a line for Palestinian and all other authors as well, that if the text has clearly anti-Semitic or otherwise discriminatory content, then it doesn't have a chance for the funding. I wouldn't even go there. I don't think that there are writers handing in literature who write racist, anti-Semitic, or violent-loving literature here. But I would like to add again that the background of the writer is not relevant for the decisions. Now the next question, shall the text sample be a part of the project that I'm applying for. Of course, where else should it be from? It shouldn't be finalized, published yet, but a work in progress. And maybe an easy question, do we have to hand in a financial plan about the use of the stipend? No, it's not a project funding. That's a big difference. You don't need to have a financial plan. Thus, you do not need to describe what you do with that money. You don't have to do that. If you know already that what you want to do with that, I'm not speaking about rent and food. If you plan research, travel, of course, it's interesting for the jury to know that. But it's not a must. It's a nice to have. Then there's a question if you can split the expose in two parts, one in the original language and one in English or German, if you remain within the limits, and the page limits. The expose may only be handed in German or English, not in your original language. The question is, if I might apply if I am still an employee or a self-employed freelancer. You may obviously do that. You do not have to stop doing your common work if you receive the stipend. But the question remains if you have the time capacity to work on your project at the side. Can you actually use the money of the work stipend for your literary project? And you need to find out about that yourself, and we evaluate that.
In the chat, there are questions posted, perhaps this refers to that, whether the 20-page writing sample can be divided into partly in German and partly in English, or whether it can be divided into the original language, 10 pages original language, 10 pages English. You may do that. You may divide your expose into various languages. Possibly you would like to do this because you're concerned that the evaluation of your original language, if it's not German and not English, perhaps your work would not be really well evaluated. And you may request, in this way, you may request a very qualitative evaluation of your original language. But I am not sure that this is the best solution for this request, to have a solid qualitative evaluation of your writing sample. There's still a hanging question whether it's from the side of the Senate department or whether from the jury. Are there issues that they really like to see, that they prefer to fund? Are there current and political issues that they really prefer to fund? No, there are not. The jury really does decide on the basis of the literary quality. I would not rule out that certain issues may be of more importance to that particular jury. They recognize that it may be good for certain authors, this or that author, to receive better visibility by the funding of their work. But overall, the jury will decide that. From this point, we cannot even say, since the jury selection is not complete, the members are not yet fully known, we can't really say. And then the dynamic of the jury itself, the interpersonal dynamics of this mix of people in the room speaking together, convincing each other, making pro and con arguments to each other. It's impossible to really say. What should be decisive is that you know what you want to do. What do you want to express? One more follow-up question to the literary quality about the genre literature, like fantasy, or is it permitted to submit these genres in a literary quality? So a follow-up question, is there a real actual chance? Have there been any writers writing in genres that have been accepted for scholarships in the past? It is not really possible to say. Jury selection is not yet finalized, and we don't know what will interest this current jury. In previous years, there has been work with fantastical or fantasy elements that was funded. If you are a fantasy writer, you have just as many chances as anybody else if the literary quality is convincing. That is still the highest overall principle by which we decide. We will not rule out your work if it happens to be fantasy, for example, or genre literature. One follow-up question: how far advanced should my project be? If in 2024 I have already concluded my project, finished it, can I still apply? Yeah. If I'm applying with a project that I may not start until next year, I don't have a writing sample yet, can I still apply by submitting a writing sample of something, a previous work for a project I haven't begun yet? It's rather complicated to do that. The literary quality that the jury is judging is based on your planned project. If you haven't begun your project yet, you may submit a sample of previous writing, something that was perhaps not published and not finished. However, the jury can't decide based on that what you are actually planning to do. What the jury is checking is the literary quality. Yes, this person needs 8 months or 12 months in order to carry out this plan, and they cannot decide based on a sample of previous work not attached to a current project. You could apply with a planned project which you intend to carry out, and you realize, during writing, things aren't going according to plan. This is not at all what I had intended to do. Things are going in different directions. I have to change my plan. Would you have to pay your stipend back in that case? I really can't answer this question. We wouldn't necessarily know how your project is going, but it's certainly not a good situation if you are funded for something which you actually then do not carry out. Then there's the follow-up question. If you would like to apply for a 24-month stipend, do you have to mention this? And within the reading sample, the writing sample, do I have to mention both several projects? It is not excluded. You may, if you have the position that you need 24-month stipend. However, in the expose, you will have to explain why you are submitting 2 text samples and explain both of them. And we are not the jury. However, if I were on the jury, that might lead to a conflict for me, because I might want to fund one of the projects and not the other. Then what would I be able to decide? It could be complex for a jury to deal with that situation. I would like to try and wrap it up. The time is passing quickly. A few other questions, perhaps the most difficult first. How would you describe literary quality? What are maybe 3 main criteria of literary quality, or is that completely up to the jury? Yes, exactly. That it would really be the decision of the jury. Literary quality is, or artistic quality, is something you cannot strictly define. It is simply decided by the jury in their constellation where and how they perceive that. Quality is a subjective judgment. Is it possible to say how many stipends overall will be available for the year 2025? I would think 15, roughly 15. It always depends on how much funding is available at overall, how many stipends can be provided. When will it be made known when the funding is available? In December, we will have this information. One final question, which I don't quite understand, but it's a follow-up question. What will happen if a project consists of many books, such as a trilogy? You probably just state that, right? Right. Depending on how far along you are in your writing, please explain in the expose how it should develop. Is one book of the trilogy already finished? What are you writing now? Do focus in your writing sample on one passage of text in the trilogy, not something from each of the 3 books. That would be too confusing. And now the follow-up question. If you are applying for the 24,000 euro, could it be that I receive only the 16,000 or 8,000 amount? Or do I have to apply for only one of the possible sums? If you apply for 24,000, it could be that the amount you are actually granted is 16,000, or from 16 to 8. You can only be reduced in the amount of funding you actually receive to the next level below. The jury, first of all, decides on the basis of your writing sample. That's the first level of consideration. Are you worthy of being funded? And then they decide about on the basis of which sums you have applied for, and then depending on your description and your expose, listing how much time you still need and the sum for which you have applied, whether these things fit in the opinion of the jury. And based on that, we will decide which sum you would receive. Follow-up question, if my work will be finished before December 2024, could I still be funded in 2025? Yes. As Lilian had mentioned earlier, it is not completely out of the question. Ideally, you're submitting a writing sample for a work that would not be completed before the stipend is actually granted and paid, but until the start of the stipend grant period, you would still be writing. If you have received, if you have been granted funding, it is recommended that you are not finished with the writing project by then. But it's very difficult to answer about this timeline. What's really difficult and could bring us into a dilemma, and that we have to request the money back from you, is that if you apply with a project which, even if you have published it on the 29th of December, for example, or sometime in December, if you are published through a publishing house in December, if we realize that your work has been published and that you have been granted a scholarship to finish it, then we will intervene and say that we will have to you will not receive your grant. We will expect it to be back to you, because the requirement of the funding application is that the work is in progress and not yet finished and published. Thank you. At what point in December 2024, once the granted stipend recipients are known, the 24,000 will be granted starting in January, and the other amounts would be granted as of February. Thank you. That would be the end of the list of questions. We will turn it back over to Moritz. Perhaps, as it's been asked many times, there is a webpage on the overall press website of which recipients of the stipend there are. This is always published for the press. For the past 5 years, you can scroll back through this online page and see who has been funded in the past. All of the names of recipients of the stipends are posted there. You can see who's current. Thank you very much for your active participation and all the questions. Thanks very much. Have a good day.